They say Rome glittered brightest at night, when torches burned against polished marble and the empire's rulers wandered halls that only a handful of souls ever saw. Yet behind the shimmering veneer of gold leaf and triumphal arches, another Rome existed, one built not on laws or legions, but on desire, fear, and rituals so disturbing they were whispered only in the darkest corners of the Senate. It is here, in the sealed chambers of the Palatine Hill, that the true theatre of power unfolded, and it is here our story begins. Imagine a corridor where the air smells of incense and sweat, where guards stand motionless though their eyes betray terror, and where every footstep carries the weight of unspoken secrets. These were not merely bedrooms, they were stages. Within them, emperors crafted nightly performances designed to remind everyone wives, concubines, attendants, even our noble families that Rome belonged to one man alone. The rituals carried out in these hidden spaces were not acts of passion, but demonstrations of absolute control. For the emperors, intimacy was never private. It was political currency. A whispered command could elevate a family to power, just as a cruel impulse could destroy a lineage that had stood for centuries. Even the most delicate moments became tools of intimidation, carefully observed by slaves trained to keep their eyes lowered and their tongues silent. But silence has a way of cracking, and through these cracks, fragments of truth slipped into the writings of chroniclers who barely dared to record them. Many official histories avoided the darkest details either out of loyalty, fear, or a desire to preserve Rome's image for posterity. Yet certain accounts survived, carried by those who witnessed what should never have been seen. They wrote cautiously, wrapping their words in metaphor, but the meaning remained unmistakable. Behind Rome's marble curtains lay a world where emperors blurred the lines between love and cruelty, desire and punishment, body and state. To step into these chambers was to step into the emperor's mind, and each mind was different. Some craved humiliation as a display of dominance, others reshaped mythology to create twisted ceremonies of devotion. Still others brought the violence of the arena into their most intimate hours. The empire's rulers were not content with power on the battlefield or in the Senate. They wanted power over breath, over trembling hands, over the final boundaries of human will. But these rituals also reveal something deeper, a truth about Rome that textbooks rarely capture. The empire was built on spectacle. In the Forum, crowds cheered as criminals were executed. In amphitheatres, bloodshed became entertainment. And in the palaces, behind closed doors, the same hunger for spectacle continued, transformed into something far more personal and far more terrifying. The stories you're about to hear survived because they horrified even ancient writers who lived in a world accustomed to brutality. They pushed the limits of what Rome believed an emperor should be, yet they also exposed the fragile nature of absolute power. When a single man believed himself a god, every ritual, no matter how perverse, became justified in his eyes. These whispering corridors of the Palatine set the stage for the emperors who followed, each adding his own darkness to Rome's forbidden archive. And none embodied this more completely than Caligula, whose nights turned pleasure into punishment, and whose bedroom rituals became a weapon wielded against the entire empire. Caligula did not wait for daylight to assert his power, his dominion sharpened in the hours when Rome slept. To enter his private chambers was to step into a world where desire bent to terror, and intimacy became a sharpened blade. While earlier emperors hid their excesses, Caligula turned them into nightly proclamations of dominance, using the bedroom as the most intimate stage for political cruelty. This was not seduction, it was subjugation, performed with the same theatrical flair he brought to the arenas and public games. Those summoned to his chambers rarely arrived by choice. Senators' wives, noble daughters, even newly married brides were escorted into rooms heavy with incense and flickering lamplight, knowing that refusal was impossible. Caligula controlled not only their bodies but their reputations. He often paraded them back into the banquets afterward, laughing as he described their forced performances to humiliated husbands who dared not raise their eyes. The rituals were a form of punishment wrapped in the illusion of pleasure, meant to remind the entire aristocracy that their fabilispos, their honour and their lineage existed at his mercy. Ancient writers spoke of these nights in fragmented whispers, hinting at ceremonies where Caligula demanded silence from his victims yet required absolute attention. He relished the moment when a proud matron trembled, when a senator's wife hoped her tears would remain unseen. He measured loyalty not in politics but in submission. Even the palace attendants, trained to obey without question, learned to fear the emperor's moods, for he reshaped the boundaries between entertainment and torment with the unpredictability of a performer intoxicated by his own script. To Caligula, the bedroom was another arena. Instead of gladiators, he directed terrified nobles. Instead of swords, he used humiliation. Rome's culture of spectacle had taught him that the greatest thrill lay not in violence alone, but in the audience's reaction. And so he created private shows in which nobles were forced to watch others being degraded, knowing their turn might come next. His desires were never private indulgences, they were public executions of dignity. Some accounts claim he selected women at feasts as casually as he chose wine. He would rise, beckon a wife from her husband's side and vanish with her, and the entire table was expected to wait in stiff silence until he returned. When he reappeared, he often offered a critique of her performance, delivered like an emperor reviewing a piece of theatre. Wives became props, husbands became spectators of their own dishonour. These rituals reveal something essential about Caligula. He viewed control over intimacy as the highest form of Roman power. Where generals conquered territories, he conquered human boundaries. Where senators wielded laws, he wielded shame. His pleasure was inseparable from domination, shaped by a culture that celebrated cruelty as entertainment. The Roman elite, accustomed to watching bodies broken in arenas, now watched their own households broken in secret chambers. Yet these excesses were not mere madness, they were calculated demonstrations. Each forced performance sent a message echoing through Rome's political hierarchy. No one, not the wealthy, not the noble, not the ancient families, stood above his whims. Caligula's bedroom became the empire's hidden court, where verdicts were delivered through humiliation, and the sentence was a lifetime of silence. But as horrifying as Caligula's rituals were, they were only the beginning of Rome's descent into theatrical depravity, for the next emperor would push the boundaries even further, transforming intimacy not only into punishment but into myth-making itself. Nero would not simply dominate his partners, he would rewrite the very meaning of desire. Nero understood something few emperors dared to admit. Power was not only displayed on the throne or in the Senate, but also in the carefully crafted illusions woven behind closed doors. Where Caligula used intimacy as punishment, Nero transformed it into theatre grand, ritualistic and deeply unsettling. His private chambers resembled stages, his lovers became actors, and every night unfolded like a distorted myth brought to life. For Nero, desire was not a private feeling. It was a script he wrote, directed, and forced others to perform. Perhaps the most shocking of his rituals were his infamous wedding ceremonies. These were not symbolic games whispered about by attendants, they were public acts, staged with priests, witnesses, and ritual garments. Nero married men as if they were imperial brides, dressing them in veils, naming them as wives, and presenting them to Rome with the same pomp reserved for empresses. In these ceremonies, he reshaped gender itself, forcing the empire to acknowledge a version of intimacy that defied its strict social order. To Nero, the boundary between emperor and actor dissolved. He moved between roles with the ease of a performer drunk on applause. The bedroom became his theatre of transformation. He reenacted myths with disturbing dedication, sometimes embodying a goddess, other times a tragic heroine, or even a divine seducer. Partners were assigned roles, costumes, and scripts. They were expected to participate in scenes borrowed from legends of forbidden love, violent passion, and supernatural union. For Nero, these reenactments were more than games. They were rituals of identity, tools for reshaping the world into a reflection of his own imagination. Yet these staged spectacles were laced with coercion. No one could refuse Nero's performance. Those chosen to play opposite him understood that a single misstep could mean exile or death. Even the most powerful senators found themselves trembling behind masks and costumes, forced to speak scripted lines as the emperor blurred the line between fantasy and command. Desire in Nero's world was not a meeting of equals, it was another arena where obedience was tested. Roman writers described these rituals with a mixture of fascination and horror, noting how Nero paraded his spouses before the elite, as if daring them to question the empire's new order. He wanted the world to witness his transformations, to feel discomfort, even revulsion. Shock was its own kind of triumph, Each wedding, each reenacted myth, each role-played ritual was a declaration that Rome belonged not to tradition, but to his whims. Beneath this spectacle lay a deeper motive: Nero's hunger for control disguised as self-expression. He reshaped roles: husband, wife, emperor, actor, because he wanted mastery over the meanings others took for granted. By transforming himself and those around him, he rewrote the social script of the empire. His rituals challenged the boundary between ruler and ruled, masculine and feminine, public and private. In his chambers, identity itself became fluid, dictated by his desires. Nero's nightly ceremonies unsettled Rome because they forced the elite to confront a new form of imperial power, one where dominance was not shouted from balconies but whispered through ritual intimacy. And though many dismissed his behavior as madness, it revealed a dangerous truth. The emperor could redefine reality simply by performing it. But if Nero transformed intimacy into drama, the emperor who followed would turn it into combat. For Commodus, the bedroom was not a stage of myths, it was an arena drenched in the echoes of violence. For most Romans, the arena was a place of spectacle where sand soaked up the blood of the condemned and the air trembled with the roar of the crowd. But for Commodus, the arena was not a destination, it was a state of mind, and when he left the Colosseum, its violence followed him into the deepest corners of his private chambers. To understand Commodus is to understand an emperor who could not distinguish between performance and reality, between gladiator and ruler, between desire and domination. He was raised among marble, but he worshipped the arena. Its brutality thrilled him, its adoration intoxicated him. And soon, the rituals he perfected beneath the public sun mutated into darker reenactments, performed in the shadows of the palace. Those brought into his chambers slaves, attendants, and even nobles found themselves forced into roles conceived not for pleasure, but for conquest. Commodus did not seek companionship, he sought opponents, victims, props for fantasies shaped by bloodlust. Witnesses whispered that his private rituals began with ceremony. He entered the bedroom wearing the armor of his favorite gladiators, gripping wooden training swords as if preparing for combat. Partners were positioned like foes on a battlefield, commanded to fight back just enough to satisfy his need for drama, but never enough to bruise his pride. The line between roleplay and real danger blurred quickly. A misstep could end in injury or worse. Commodus believed dominance was proven through physical superiority. He relished pinning partners to the ground, reenacting staged victories with breathless intensity. Sometimes he demanded applause from terrified attendants, forcing them to cheer as though he were standing triumphant in the amphitheatre itself. Even in the bedroom, he craved spectatorship. Without witnesses, his victories felt incomplete. The rituals grew more elaborate. He ordered slaves to dress as defeated warriors, complete with painted wounds. He reenacted mythic battles where he cast himself as Hercules, overpowering partners who trembled beneath the weight of his fantasies. Roman historians later described these behaviors with horror, noting how Commodus replaced tender moments with the mock violence of staged killings. Desire became indistinguishable from combat. It would be easy to dismiss these acts as the whims of a deranged emperor, but they reflected the culture that shaped him. Rome celebrated dominance. Its citizens thrived on the humiliation of others. Gladiatorial games were not aberrations, they were the heartbeat of the empire. Commodus simply brought Rome's public obsessions into his most intimate spaces. Where others drew boundaries between theatre and life, he erased them completely. In these rituals, Commodus also found solace. The arena gave him what politics could not: admiration free from critique, victory without consequence. In the bedroom, he recreated that same world, one where no senator questioned him, no conspirator plotted behind his back. Every ritual reaffirmed that he was stronger, faster, and more feared than any man alive. His partners were not lovers, but proof of his invincibility. Yet these nightly performances chipped away at the empire's stability. Rumours spread. Noble families whispered that the emperor valued blood over governance, fantasy over duty. And though his rituals remained hidden, their echoes fueled growing unrest. Rome could tolerate indulgence, but it feared an emperor who preferred mock execution to leadership. Commodus's legacy reminds us that when violence becomes entertainment, it easily becomes desire. And when an emperor embraces brutality as intimacy, the entire empire trembles. But as shocking as his rituals were, the next ruler would descend even deeper into forbidden territory, where religion, sexuality, and ceremony fused into rites that stunned even Rome itself. Elagabalus ascended to the throne as a boy, yet his youth belied a mind consumed with spectacle, desire, and the fusion of the sacred and the profane. Unlike his predecessors, who cloaked excess in theatre or arena violence, Elagabalus wove religion directly into his intimate rituals, creating ceremonies that blurred worship and eroticism. His bedroom became a temple, and those summoned within its walls were not merely partners, they were participants in rites designed to shock, awe, and terrify. Accounts describe nights where the emperor commanded exotic dancers to form intricate tableaux, their bodies moving in precise rhythms meant to honor deities even as they aroused mortal senses. Priests chanted incantations, lamps flickered over gilded altars, and offerings of incense, wine, and rare delicacies lined every surface. In this setting, sexuality was elevated to a ritualistic plane, and the act of intimacy became inseparable from religious devotion. To Elagabalus, power was both spiritual and corporeal. Mastery over desire was mastery over the gods themselves. But the ceremonies were not solely about beauty or symbolism. They were displays of authority designed to subvert expectation and reshape morality. Elagabalus compelled attendants and nobles to participate, assigning roles that forced men and women alike into positions of reverence, submission, or embarrassment. Those who resisted risked humiliation or exile. Every night he tested the boundaries of propriety, daring Rome's elite to confront the unsettling intersection of sex, power, and ritual. Elagabalus's rituals often included dramatic transformations. He would dress in sacred vestments, sometimes taking on the appearance of a goddess or high priest, while his companions enacted symbolic roles in ceremonial reenactments of divine myths. Every gesture, every word was calculated to evoke awe, fear, or desire. Observers, whether courtiers, priests, or foreign dignitaries, could scarcely distinguish devotion from debauchery. In these private ceremonies, the emperor both performed and commanded worship, creating an intimacy that was both terrifying and inescapable. Surviving sources depict acts that scandalized even the notoriously indulgent Roman historians. He offered rewards for sexual displays aligned with his religious visions, arranged marriages between men and women in the service of symbolic rites, and used sacred objects to sanction acts of erotic power. In every detail, Elagabalus sought to merge the sacred with the profane, demonstrating that in his world, ritual and desire were not separate, they were instruments of rule. Yet beneath the shock and outrage lies a deeper significance. Elagabalus challenged the rigid moral and social codes of Rome, using the bedroom as a laboratory for experimentation with identity, devotion, and authority. His acts were not both mere indulgence, they were political statements, assertions of sovereignty over both flesh and faith. By fusing eroticism with ceremony, he forced Rome to confront the malleability of power and the frightening idea that an emperor could redefine moral order according to personal vision. These ceremonies left a lasting impression, shaping how posterity imagined the extremes of imperial excess. Elagabalus remains one of Rome's most misunderstood rulers, remembered as decadent and perverse, yet his rituals reveal an intricate web of spectacle, spirituality, and control. He transformed private desire into public mythology, demonstrating that in Rome, the bedroom could be as potent a stage for authority as the forum, the amphitheatre, or the throne. And while Elagabalus's nights combined the divine and the forbidden, the final chapter reminds us that the human hunger for control through intimacy did not die with Rome. It echoes through history, shaping power in ways that remain all too familiar today. The emperors of Rome ruled vast territories, yet their most revealing acts often occurred behind locked doors. Caligula, Nero, Commodus, Elagabalus each manipulated desire, ritual, and intimacy as instruments of power. These practices, once hidden in palaces and whispered among terrified attendants, illuminate a timeless truth. The private sphere is often the most honest reflection of authority. The bedroom becomes a crucible where control is tested, loyalty measured, and fear administered. And though centuries have passed, the lessons of Rome resonate far beyond marble halls and ancient scrolls. In the modern world, the echoes of these rituals are unmistakable. Celebrity culture, political scandals, and the exposure of private indiscretions all reveal the enduring interplay between desire and domination. When public figures wield intimacy as leverage, or when private affairs spark public outrage, we witness the same dynamics that once played out in Roman chambers. Power thrives in secrecy, yet it leaves traces, rumours, photographs, court records that remind us how human fascination with control, shame, and spectacle transcends eras. The Romans perfected a form of influence that relied not solely on armies or decrees, but on orchestrated private performances with lasting societal impact. Consider the parallels. Modern scandals often captivate because they blur the line between the public and the personal. A leaked letter, a hidden photograph, a whispered confession each can topple reputations just as effectively as a senator's humiliation in Caligula's chamber. Desire becomes a weapon, intimacy a tool for assertion. The pattern is remarkably consistent. Those with authority often transform private relationships into arenas for demonstrating dominance, while observers, whether courtiers, journalists, or the general public, bear witness to the unfolding spectacle. The more secretive the act, the more potent its political resonance. These ancient stories also highlight the vulnerability of those caught within power's orbit. Senators' wives, noble attendants, or young companions were rarely innocent participants. They were instruments through which emperors projected authority. Today, the same principle persists, albeit in modern forms. Staffers, associates, or family members may become pawns in public figures' manipulation of influence. The mechanics of control remain unchanged. Submission, compliance, and performance are demanded, and violation of expectation carries consequence. History demonstrates that power and intimacy are inexorably linked, and that desire often serves as a lens through which true hierarchies are revealed. Yet there is a caution embedded in these tales. The allure of absolute control of orchestrating not only actions but emotions, loyalties, and secrets can corrupt entirely. Rome's emperors remind us that human ambition rarely respects boundaries. What begins as spectacle or indulgence can metastasize into cruelty, humiliation, and moral distortion. And though empires crumble and dynasties fade, the impulse to command the private lives of others persists, resurfacing in forms both subtle and scandalous across centuries. Ultimately, the fascination with these hidden rituals is more than voyeurism. It is an exploration of power itself, how it is performed, maintained, and exposed. From the flickering torches of the Palatine Hill to modern headlines, the narrative is strikingly consistent. Desire, intimacy, and secrecy reveal far more about authority than proclamations or public ceremonies ever could. Private acts, when weaponized, are a mirror, reflecting the deepest structures of human control. As we close the curtain on these stories, one haunting truth remains. Empires rise and fall, dynasties fade into dust, but the hunger to manipulate, dominate, and orchestrate desire behind closed doors persists. Rome is gone, yet its lessons endure. Where power exists, the private sphere is never truly safe. And in that darkness, the human appetite to control others continues, as relentless and revealing as it was 2 millennia ago.